Hey everybody, Ed here with the Digital Digest, and today I wanted to share a quick update on my experience with the Samsung NX500. This mirrorless interchangeable lens camera from Samsung retails for $699 currently, but at launch it was slated for $799, and I can understand because of its capability and its form factor. When it comes to the kit that you're getting, it does include a 16 to 50 millimeter power zoom kit lens that does have optical image stabilization. You can see the power rocker right here for zoom control, as well as a function button. On the left hand side of the camera, we have the ability to access our ports, micro USB and a micro HDMI out. In terms of overall functionality, what's really important though to note about this mirrorless interchangeable lens camera is that it does have a fantastic 28 megapixel BSI APS-C sensor. So that backlit illumination means that we are getting some best-in-class, I would say, performance, especially in low light. And Samsung has done a very good job with the included kit lens. They do have a relatively broad set of glass available for their NX lineup, but in terms of exposure and overall adoption, that is where Samsung is still trying to get themselves firmly in the game. I can say this is definitely, without hesitation, the best offering I've seen from them thus far, but the fact that it dropped $100 right out of the gate says something, at least to most consumers, that clearly something must be wrong, and I'll get to that, which is the video side of things. I mean, one of the biggest bragging rights about this camera is not its still performance, even though the still performance is very, very good. In fact, some could even try to argue better than the Sony a6000, really its most direct competitor, especially since this does have true 4K video capture. We're not talking about UHD like most of Sony's dedicated video solutions, camcorders like the one I'm filming on now, but you do get true 4K resolution out of this, cinema 4K. Now, whether or not you need that, an entirely different story. You also get a great Super AMOLED display that has a full 180 degree rotation here, so selfies, if that's what you're after, you have that ability. No electronic viewfinder, but again, that AMOLED display is really best in class. And the touchscreen, capacitive, also best in class. Things that I wish I saw on a Sony camera. Samsung has brought basically every great piece of tech that they have at their disposal to this body at an affordable price point, in my opinion. In terms of buttons, everything feels well made, operates as it should. So many points of hybrid autofocus on here, contrast and phase, that it is in many ways faster than just about any other camera, except for the a6000 that you could compare it to. And that really comes down to what type of situation you're trying to shoot with it. Quick side-by-side with the a6000, I don't have the power zoom, but I do have the 20mm prime, and you can see they are very, very close in form factor. But when it comes to the overall still capability, I'm still partial to the a6000, even though it lacks the 4K cinema option here that you do get with the Sammy NX500. So in terms of battery life, things are good. It charges via micro USB. The battery bay down here, battery life solid. It does, I would say, slightly outperform what you'll get with the NX500. The mode dial gives you quick access to things like auto, as well as basically every other mode you could imagine. And Samsung is heavy on being feature rich, you know, building in all sorts of different capabilities. You do have Wi-Fi and NFC. You can see the NFC contact point right here next to the tripod mount. And it will allow for transfer. You do have time-lapse capability on here, but nowhere near the marketplace, the suite of different applications designed for Sony's E-mount. So while there's so much to like about what Samsung is doing here, my best way of putting it is that they're kind of in that position that Sony was many years ago. Even though they do have a developed line of lenses, they still just simply don't have the market share, the presence, if you will, in the business, which is what Sony was missing back then in at least the even prosumer world of interchangeable lens cameras, let alone the pro world. And that's what Sony's been working on in their DI business and doing so successfully. So I see Samsung is in a very similar position and working towards improving themselves. If I take a quick jump into the menu here, I'm going to try to give you as best a look as possible. You can see quick access to the photo size in terms of quality. Keep in mind, when you are shooting video with this, you are going to get a different crop factor, essentially. You're not going to get that same 16 to 50 mil range you have for the still side of things. And that's one of the nuanced differences between this and the much more expensive sibling, the NX1, which is the pro version or prosumer version of this camera. And that's just one of the things. Clean HDMI out, not available here, but on the NX1 you do get it. So direct readout of sensor, clean HDMI out, those are just a few of the things. You get a viewfinder. Here, no viewfinder, no option for an external viewfinder even, which I know frustrates many users. Your autofocus mode, I mean, the menu is really clean, and again, it can all be navigated with touch, which is really, really nice. I think that's something that so many users expect these days when everything is driven by touch response, especially a capacitive experience, and here we have it. Of course, the optical image stabilization, 2 different modes for different levels of shaking, clearly, and that will have an effect on the video quality. Your flash, if I jump into movie settings, you can see right there I do have the Cinema 4096 by 2160 at 24p. That is the highest quality you can capture in. You can step it down to UHD at 30p or 1080p at 60p, and so on and so forth, and keep dropping down all the way to 640 by 480. Keep in mind, this is capturing an H.265, which is really, again, another element that shows Samsung is so future-minded, ahead of the curve. H.265 offering the same video quality, but at a much higher efficiency rate when it comes to the bit rate and the encoding. So that means that your files are roughly half the size they would traditionally be with something like XAVCS capturing UHD. But the downside is there's really no way to play this back natively, which means that you're left having to convert just about every video file you shoot. So that is a downside to the great tech that they've put together here, something I have to mention because you must be aware. And that's probably the reason this camera has taken a $100 price point dump out of the gate. Your autofocus responsiveness. I mean, everything is there that you would expect to see, and that's what Samsung has done right, in my opinion. They haven't left any features out that anybody would want, especially for such an inexpensive backdoor, if you will, to the NX1's performance, because the NX1 is twice the price of this camera, the body, the kit package itself, just to get the NX1 body. And for most people out there, I think that they are going to be willing to make the compromise here if they can deal with the fact that every video, which really, again, in my opinion, video is the strong suit. This is the least expensive true 4K video capture interchangeable lens camera ever made at its price. But that is with the caveat of having to convert everything, which is a major pain. But everything else you would expect to be there is there. Grid lines, the center marker, customization of buttons. No dedicated movie mode, which is a little bit of an odd thing. There is a movie capture button right here, so you can instantly start videoing, but you don't get a proper preview, and there is a workaround on that. But that's something Samsung really should have thought of in a camera that especially is trying to lure or really compel or be compelling in a world where 4K cinema doesn't really exist on any consumer cameras, especially at such a low price with a lens already out of the box. But that pretty much covers, everything you need to see in terms of menu diving. And from what I've seen so far, there is really much more to like here than dislike, as long as you're aware of what you're getting yourself into with regard to the video end of things. The stills are beautiful. They don't require any conversion. Of course, if you're working with RAW files, that's another story. But in the traditional sense, you're not going to have any qualms with still image quality or autofocus performance. In fact, many will argue the autofocus here, even though it's not as fast, again, as the more expensive NX1, is superior to that of the A6000 that I brought out before. But I think that's really a matter of personal preference, experience, and also, much like the glass lineup, while many will argue there are many more lenses for the NX, not when you take into account full-frame lenses that can be used. I mean, the E-mount lineup is gigantic at this point. Yes, a lot of it overlaps and is more expensive than Samy's glass, and that's not to say Samy's glass is cheap. It's also very expensive in many cases. But Sony, as far as I'm concerned, has a lineage there that Samy simply doesn't. And that's what they're working on here. And this is a really good step, very promising for their future as long as they don't walk away from it. You have a Wi-Fi button there to basically initiate connectivity with other Wi-Fi based devices. You can't transfer videos, but you can, of course, dump off stills to basically any device through a direct Wi-Fi connection that can be initiated with NFC, just as it would be on the Sony counterpart that I was bringing out before, the A6000. And the 28 megapixel sensor really does do a great job in this form factor. And so as far as going out to other glass to take advantage of this, again, almost pocketable body, it really is very impressive. Now, not having a viewfinder, I think, is going to be a game breaker for many of you out there, especially in a world where Sony is continuously acknowledging that viewfinders are even important on pocket cameras like the RX100 Mark III, and even the new point-and-shoots that Sony's come out with do incorporate viewfinders. So I think that's another area where this camera, I'm not going to say falls short, but will disappoint much of the consumers that can afford to actually pony up the $700 for it. So while this isn't the NX1, and we all know that, and it's not trying to become a prosumer product, the fact that it gives so much quality and value at the price, I think Samsung was smart to keep it differentiated from the NX1, but maybe they did a little bit too much, and maybe that great future-proofing of H.265 has backfired a little bit because for the average consumer, more work is a less enticing product. When it comes to autofocus speed, I already mentioned very, very fast, and you can see it pulling up, basically its different points of detection, which again do add up and account to more than what you'll find on the A6000, even though they're very close in performance. And people are claiming that you will get more keepers from the NX500, and I see why. I mean, the A6000 can be hit or miss, whereas the NX500 does tend to lock on to what you want, and you always have the capability of actually using the touchscreen, something that people will continue to wish they could do with something like the A6000. But, the A6000 has the benefit of the built-in viewfinder. Even though it doesn't have the great video quality, it's still very, very good. In terms of other things to be aware of, I already mentioned everything is accessible here from the menu. So you can see right here the connection guide, basically letting you know that it's supported only by Android OS devices. You can download and install the Samsung Camera Manager, and then in doing so, use Galaxy. You have to download it from the Galaxy apps or Google Play Store, of course, and then once you have that installed, you can begin doing exactly what I mentioned before, which is using NFC to initiate communication between this and your Android phone, and then basically copy over images, as well as have a control feature as well. So nice to have that at your disposal. Quick control here to touch to autofocus. You can turn that off. You can change your autofocus point, your tracking, as well as your one-touch shot. If you want to actually control shutter by touching it, you can do that as well. There you have it. So, I mean, a versatile camera. It appears Samsung, they've been doing this for a while now, not quite as long as someone like Sony, but they, I think, saw Sony's model, saw that they were innovative, pushed the envelope, and realized we can do it too. We've got the budget, we have the consumer electronics know-how and the overall business, and sensors, even though it's not their strong suit compared to a company like Sony, they are really getting up there in terms of just the phone business alone, they have all the more reason to be interested in making more and more sensors and higher quality sensors and really trying to change the game. And what they've done here by bringing all the latest tech, the latest and greatest, into this package makes it look fantastic on paper. Build quality is good, form factor is good, audio quality is even good that this thing captures. But at the end of the day, the overall experience that I think most people are looking for from a camera, this will meet for the average consumer. But anyone who's already in love with the system, it's going to be challenging to transition as straightforward and comprehensive and, again, technologically advanced as this is. Best bang for your buck on hardware, in my opinion. But at the end of the day, the overall experience, I would still pick my A6000. And there are a lot of reasons for that, but that's what today's video is not about. It's just about an update on this camera. So I think it's a great value for the money. The zoom using the control works, nicely, but you can switch that on and off and essentially use the actual ring here to zoom instead. You can see I'm doing that right now, and it's fairly quick to respond. In terms of the function button, that's where you're going to be able to switch between using the zoom rocker and the ring for zooming. And I could have just flipped this up to make all of your lives easier. That would have made all of this easier. Just to give you a quick example. Shutter sound not very loud, but very close to what Sony has with their own products. So no surprise there when it comes to the actual shutter sound associated with a mirrorless interchangeable lens camera based around an APS-C sensor that is backlit or illuminated, I should say. So a lot to like here. Great camera, great video capability, again, taking that crop factor into account. Great autofocus, a beautiful Super AMOLED display. Build quality is good. Power on and off time, very quick. Quick demonstration, how quick I am to being able to shoot. I mean, Samsung has paid attention to all of the competition and really tried to address every single thing a user could want to make sure that there are very few shortcomings. Unfortunately, the ones that you do run into are simple ones that a little more experience in the business is going to rectify. And again, the key difference between this and the more expensive NX1 are really just prosumer features. I told you, direct readout of the sensor when it comes to video, so not the extreme crop we get here, where you're not starting at 16, even though you might expect it. Viewfinder, I mean, there's no weather sealing here. You don't have clean HDMI out. So there are a lot of different elements. And even though this was an update, it is really a review in many ways of the NX500 because I like so many things about it. But I'm really more interested in what Samsung's going to do with the next generation. And I can only hope that H.265 by then will have matured more to be something we can play back with ease rather than have to convert, because that would really make this a killer camera and something that I could more easily recommend to the average consumer. The person who's not worried about converting all of their video, this is a steal for the price point. I mean, the video is gorgeous, as long as, again, you can deal with the crop factor that the NX1 gets around. But beyond that, again, I cannot reiterate that Samsung has outdone themselves. The camera is just missing some fundamental polish that comes with experience in the digital imaging business, something that, again, reminds me of Sony and what they did with E-mount, the development, and I think that's exactly the inspiration that Samsung had trying to really build the NX brand and convince consumers that they had another mirrorless compact option that wouldn't sacrifice still or video quality. So a great camera, but it would not be my choice at $699. I would sooner be waiting to see Sony's next offering in the APS-C field, and even considering discounted full-frame bodies like the A7 if 4K video quality isn't the paramount to your imaging hybrid, or I should say mirrorless experience. So can this replace a digital SLR? Absolutely. It can in many ways replace a video camera. But another thing I didn't point out in the 4K video capture is that these clips are not limited to 29 minutes, but even less. roughly half that. So that's something, if you want the full 59 capture, almost 30 minutes, you will have to go with the NX1. That's yet another way that Samsung made sure that this is a consumer camera. But in my opinion, the 15-minute capture limit on this is more than enough for the average consumer. But that's just another thing I had to point out. So great battery life, great still quality, video quality, again with the caveat, no viewfinder, but build quality to match. You do feel like you're getting something solid at the price point. Samsung has made a great camera. They just need to fix a few things, as I've pointed out, and hopefully the next gen, the NX600 or whatever it may end up being named, will address those issues. And hopefully they will integrate a viewfinder, because at this price point it isn't unreasonable, even though I've continued to point out what a value the NX500 really is. Any questions or comments, please feel free to post them. And of course, as usual, please feel free to subscribe. Later.